Wheels up for Mumbai. The Prime Minister looks to rebuild ties with India amid security concerns back home. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The answers you need
from the people in the know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Prime Minister Carney's leaving town again. It is destination India today. But the Prime Minister, his plane took off a couple of hours ago. While there, Mr. Carney will attempt to thaw relations that went into a deep freeze during the Trudeau years over allegations of an assassination of a Sikh activist. There was a tit-for-tat of diplomatic expulsions following that. But now Mr. Carney will meet again with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the goal of securing a comprehensive free trade agreement with the country. Part of that effort includes Canadian government officials telling news reporters in Ottawa they no longer believe India is linked to violent crime in Canada. That will be news to someone like Maninder Singh, the head of the Sikh Federation of Canada. News reports just this week reported that Singh and his family were warned by law enforcement about a credible threat on his life. Just before Prime Minister Modi came to Canada for the G7, Singh accused the Carney government of being more interested in trade deals than human rights.
As somebody that has been dealing with these threats of violence through these duty to warns, I think the previous government and this government, in the sense of the duty to warns, there is no difference. I think there's a principled stand in September of 2023 when Prime Minister Trudeau, along with Jagmeet Singh at the time, stood in Parliament and actually condemned India for what they had done and made that public. So that was, in my mind, a very principled stand that was taken at that moment. That continued on with the expulsion of diplomats. There was a strong line that was being towed. The diplomatic row that continued from there, Canada was not backing down. And to see that within a month of the last election, all these promises that were made before the election, and then afterwards seeing almost complete U-turns from every political party except for the NDP, which has stood its ground firmly on this issue. I think we do have a problem where we're seeing trade and economic ties that are now overriding human rights and the lives of Canadian citizens and their safety.
But not to worry. According to Gary Anandasangari, the public safety minister, he told reporters this week the government is taking transnational crime seriously.
The safety and security of all Canadians is absolutely critical to our government. The safety and security of the Sikh community and members of diaspora communities overall is something that does concern us. Over the years, we've taken a number of very important steps, particularly around extortion. The Prime Minister was in British Columbia just last week, met with police leaders as well as members of the community along with our caucus members to talk about the number of measures we've taken, including investments of additional 20 RCMP officers on investigation, the availability of helicopters, of course, the suite of criminal justice bills that are now going through the House that will likely be law over the next several weeks. So we've taken some concrete steps, and we believe that the safety and security of the Sikh community is in good hands.
Prime Minister Carney will be joined on this trip to India by the most recent floor-crossing MP, Matt Genereux, although why remains a mystery. When he was cornered by the press gallery, Genereux suggested he's just happy to be part of the team.
There's some that don't agree with it, and fortunately that's, I guess we're going to leave that.
What do you make of those who say that you sold out to go on this trip?
What do you expect to get accomplished, learn
the
from
Prime Minister has an aggressive agenda around the world, and he's asked me to help him in supporting that, so that's absolutely what I'm going to do. And I think we'll wait and see kind of what comes out of the trip.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe will also tag along on this trip to India. He says there's huge opportunity for his province, and he's hoping for some tariff relief on some Canadian farm exports.
Uranium, potash, and agricultural products make up the bulk of our exports into India today. And so, advancing any trade volumes or opportunities or values in those spaces, I think would be, a potential marker for success on this particular mission. that's what I will be looking for. In the case of, as you know, we have some agricultural tariffs on pulse crops, peas and lentils as we speak. One of the challenges, and what I am hearing, is that there's a potential for those to not be removed, but actually, in the case of lentils, to potentially be increased. And that is due to some local and domestic challenges that India is having with their agricultural prices. I would hope that we're able to have conversations that would exempt or not have that tariff increased on the products that we're currently exporting to India, so that we could, on future engagements, actually look at having those tariffs removed.
Also along for the ride will be the Premier of New Brunswick, Susan Holt. Her province exports about $200 million worth of products a year to India and is hoping for more.
We already have some engagement in our forestry sector with Aditya Birla Group. We see our global giants here in New Brunswick, like McCain's, that have footprints and really large presence in India. And so the exchanges between our two jurisdictions have been growing, but we see the opportunity to sell a lot more New Brunswick products and knowledge into the markets and the people ready to spend in India. So we're going to be leveraging the interest that we saw, the connections and the fit and the partnerships that have been formed, that the opportunities New Brunswick has jumped in and they've seen, okay, you know what, we've got a fish that bites. We're going to lean in and sell a lot more.
India is the first stop on what will be a 3-country tour for Prime Minister Carney. After India, he will visit Australia and later Japan. All told, he'll be out of the country for at least the next week and a half. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow
Returns on News Radio.
With my friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube, columnist for The National Post, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephan Harper. Welcome back.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing today?
Very good. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre is going to deliver a speech today about Canada-U.S. relations. It's at the Economic Club of Canada in Toronto. Much of the news media is insisting that he must mention Donald Trump by name. Say his name, Pierre. Say his name. And he must tell Canadians how he, as Prime Minister, would handle the Trump administration. What do you think of this conventional wisdom?
Well, they can propose whatever they want. If he wants to mention Trump by name, he'll choose to. It's not the decision of the media. It's ultimately the choice of Pierre Poilievre, his speechwriters, and various senior advisors, and whatever they feel like doing going forward. But in terms of telling the second part, telling Canadians how he would handle or how he would deal directly with the Trump administration, I don't think that's out of the ordinary, and I think you can talk about that in both generalities and more directly. Generalities in terms of how the ebbs and flows of communication would go, if there would be improvements, and how so. Would he be able to work with Donald Trump? And if he can, how would he do it? And possibly some of the policy ideas that he may have going forward. And looking at things such as safety and security issues, which, yes, have been tackled to some degree, but certainly need to be done more so. You know, the issue of fentanyl, even though it hasn't popped up very much just because of the tariff war we're going through, is still something that obviously U.S. President Donald Trump cares about, even brought it up, as you may remember, during his State of the Union, although just more in a more generalized theme. So it's something that's top of mind. And in general, how Canada-U.S. relations can go forward, whether it be CUSMA or whatever. We have to basically come to a point, or at least a position or a period of time where things are better, because our historic relationship with the United States, you know, our closest friend, ally, trading partner, and so forth, is very, very poor right now.
He's also being encouraged. It's been suggested he has to somehow counter what I would call the hissy fit remark from Jamil Javani. When Jamil Javani, a conservative MP from the Durham region, went on Breitbart News in the United States, said Canadians have to stop throwing hissy fits about Donald Trump and come to the reality that the United States is our closest neighbor, ally, and trading partner. And Jamel Giovanni got a lot of pushback. Pierre Poilievre tried to, I would say, distance himself from that remark when he said he speaks for himself, I speak for the party. But do you think Pierre Poilievre, what do you think? Should he try and somehow counter this hissy fit remark? What do you think?
No, and I think you actually answered it as you were posing your question to me. The fact is that Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, decided to distance himself from Jamel Giovanni, who is a Conservative MP and obviously a member of the Conservative caucus. You know, leaders and members of caucus can obviously have differences of opinion. It is allowed. Even though obviously there should be caucus unity and caucus tends to march in lockstep with one another, there obviously are, you know, everyone is a different person. They think differently about certain things. They perceive things differently. And for that reason, you know, while certainly we can discuss Jamal Giovanni's trip as a separate issue and whether he should or shouldn't have done it and whether it was or wasn't beneficial in the grand scheme of things, the end result is that Pierre Poilievre doesn't have to either defend or explain it because, one, Mr. Giovanni is a free individual living in a free society. Two, he went over to the United States. Three, we know that he met with U.S. President J.D. Vance, who he went to school with, and met with U.S. President Donald Trump to some extent. And four, the issue has been what it's been. Pierre Poilievre obviously is the leader of the party. He has his own ideas and direction for the party and for the country and for a conservative government if he's able to lead one in the next election. And that should be the main focus, not what one MP decides to do.
As I say, the speech, it's for the business crowd in Toronto, the lunchtime crowd. So Pierre Poilievre is speaking at the Economic Club. And at the very same time, I don't know if they coordinated this, the Liberals. Maybe they did. I don't know. For people who are interested in this, Dominic LeBlanc, who is the Prime Minister's really point person on the trade file, he's at the Canadian Club in Toronto giving a speech at the same time. So that's very interesting. Both starting in about 10 minutes from now.
Yes, that's true. Now, look, I don't know if one or the other, and, you know, it's easy to suspect one way or the other, but certainly there'll be competing messages. So it'll be interesting to see how the media perceives it.
But do you think, this will be my last question on this.
Sure.
Do normal people really care about these speeches?
I don't know. Do normal people care about politics all that much? I mean, it's sad to say, but it's true. As time goes along, people like you, I, and others are becoming, I would hope not dinosaurs, but we're getting pretty close to a fossilized version of what people find to be interesting and fascinating about day-to-day operations in Canada, and politics is one of them. It's unfortunate. I don't like it. I'm sure you don't like it. I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this show don't technically really care. You know, even if they don't care about everything with the same passion you and I do, I'm sure they would like it discussed more and understood more. But again, that's just sort of the society we live in. And for all politicians, that's what they have to deal with.
All right. When we come back, Budget Day in Alberta. This fall will be referendum season in that province as well. And holy smokes, some of the insults coming Premier Smith's way. I'll ask Michael Taube, who has known Danielle Smith for about 30 years, about some of the insults, some of the commentary about Premier Smith. When we return, this is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Back with Michael Taube, columnist for the National Post, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and someone who has known Danielle Smith for a long time. I said 30 years. Am I in the ballpark there, Michael? 30 years or so, something?
Actually, it is 30 years this year. So, yeah, you're right.
So she has announced plans to hold a referendum on immigration/healthcare issues in the province of Alberta in October. This is a snapshot of some of what she has faced since that announcement. They have called her a Nazi. They have called her a fascist, a xenophobic. She's xenophobic. She is cruel and inherently racist. She is the most dangerous politician in Canada. The most dangerous politician in Canada. Goodness, the most dangerous politician. And evil. That's nice. Evil. Look, I don't know Danielle Smith. I've spoken with her a few times. I've done I think 3 interviews with her. She's pleasant enough. I thought I didn't get a big Hitler vibe from her.
No.
What
True.
do you make of these characterizations of the Premier of Alberta?
I mean, are they even really worth getting into? They're just so disgusting. And they're wrong. Every single one of them is wrong. I mean, people can perceive whatever they want about Danielle Smith, Pierre Poilievre, Rob Snow, Michael Taube, and the rest of us. That's fine. But come on. There's no history of this. There's no direct or indirect ties. Danielle Smith is actually completely the opposite of what they're suggesting. Now, why have these things come out? Well, one, people on the far left and even some on the center left obviously want to attack their opponents, so they use words and cheap shots and things that just don't apply to an individual to try and score political points. It's disgusting, but that's the way politics sometimes is played. But the other reason why you're seeing some of this come out is because they're furious over the fact that when it comes to the issue of Alberta independence, this is not something Danielle Smith necessarily wants to directly deal with, like a vote or a referendum or something of that nature. Yes, she said that obviously Albertans are open to discussing their future, what they want to do in the country, how the provincial rights and various other things. Various issues of autonomy, certainly provincial autonomy, are worth discussing. But when you talk about separation from the country, it's a completely different issue. Plus, let's be realistic. If we believe polls, and polls can obviously be taken with a grain of salt, most polls are showing, give or take, about 2/3 of Albertans for sure want to stay in Canada. It's higher in some, a little lower in others, but we'll put it around there. It doesn't mean that the group that wants to be independent should be ignored completely, but it's about 1/3, give or take. Doesn't mean that they should be ignored, doesn't mean you shouldn't deal with them, doesn't mean they shouldn't be at the negotiation table, or to call them a bunch of Nazi, xenophobic, racist, etc. But unfortunately, it's a lot of political gamesmanship, and frustration has been running high in lots of parts of the country. Alberta's no different, I'm afraid.
Okay. Good to hear from you this week. As always, we'll speak to you next week. All the best. Michael, thank you.
You too, Rob. Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye. That's Michael Taube, columnist. You can read him in the National Post, Loonie Politics, Troy Media, speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Coming up next, it's our Thursday Newsday panel and something new that we've been doing on Thursdays, Focus Nova Scotia. It's budget day in Alberta today. They released the budget this week in Nova Scotia, a $1.2 billion budget deficit for a province with a population of a little more than 1 million people. Big number. And lots of debate about it, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Well, it's time for Focus Nova Scotia as we welcome back once more Jordi Morgan, Director of Strategic Growth and Partnerships for Atlantic Canada and Enterprise Canada. Jordi, great to hear from you.
Hey, Rob, good to hear from you too.
And Matt Whynot, former Nova Scotia NDP MLA political commentator. Matt, welcome back. Great to hear from you again.
Yeah, you too, brother.
So it is Alberta budget day today. We'll see that budget in a few hours. Earlier in the week, it was Nova Scotia's turn. Big deficit. Spending up, cuts planned. Spending up, cuts planned. A neat trick from the government. What do you think of the budget, Matt?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's from what I look at, the Houston government inherited a surplus. These are cuts everywhere. We're talking about daycares in the valley, arts programs, sports programs, and credit rating agency decreased last week. To me, this just comes down to they didn't have a plan, and aren't Tories supposed to be good with money? The other thing that also to mention is that $17 billion debt in 2021. They're projecting it to be $36 billion for a province the size of Nova Scotia by 2029. So
Wow.
it's going to hurt, and here we are.
Jordi, what do you think of it right off the top?
Well, I really enjoy Matt's social media post because I saw him out with his, the perpetually aggrieved members of the NSGEU complaining about these budget cuts with his megaphone in front of the legislature. It was a great shot, but I couldn't figure out if he was sucking or blowing because, what we have is a situation where first they're saying, you're spending way too much and the debt's going too high, but you're making too many cuts. So I'm trying to figure out where the complaint is here. The government overspending has gone, as they say, overspending has gone to everything that Nova Scotia needs. It's healthcare, it's education, it's housing, it's seniors care. When you look at long-term care, that is a big budget item. All of these things were ignored by previous governments for well over a decade. And the opposition is saying they want more spending and more tax cuts. And Claudia Chender wants to subsidize power rates to make them more affordable. All of these things cost money, right? So my question is pick a lane because you can't call for more spending and then more cuts and then at the same time criticizing, trying to put in place some fairly modest restraint measures that, by the way, it's not that they're sitting there with politicians running down a list of things that they're going to cut. What they do is they go into the departments and they say, where do we find some savings that we can actually apply to the budget? And these are recommendations that are coming back that are then, that then have to go through cabinet. Matt knows how he was in there. He knows how this thing works. So these are recommendations that are coming up through the government as well on what the priorities should be in terms of how they're managing their money.
There is, Jordi. I've been through this before. I remember Doug Ford's first budget, very similar. There's going to be a PR nightmare about this. Every cut to every program, like this grants program, for example, and we're seeing this already in the Herald and on the news, it's going to have a sob story attached to it. There will be warnings of imminent disaster. Okay, we are already seeing this. Do you think the government is prepared to navigate that? What do you think?
Well, I think, any time that you have grants being cut to specific groups, those people are going to be hurt by it. And that is unfortunate. But at some point, you have to figure where is your priority spending? I think when you talk about the PR nightmare, and I can appreciate this, it is very difficult to be in a situation where you have this kind of an economic situation foisted upon you because of things that are very often largely out of your control. And you could see it right across the country when you look at the situation economically in the country. But then trying to say, okay, we do have to fill gaps in healthcare. We do have to fill gaps in long-term care. There are all of these other priorities that have to be met. So where do you go in and try and trim the fat? And that is the process of budget making. And it's difficult, but we'll see how it gets sold.
Matt,
talk about the
what
PR.
Do you think?
The PR campaign. I mean, good God, I would hope they have a plan. They just increased how much comm staff they have by 30% in this budget. So he's taken a playbook out of the mayor of Halifax's office. So no doubt that they have their campaign agency on speed dial to help them through this. So it'll be interesting to see over the next little bit. I mean, the other thing to remind folks is the premier's not at the legislature today, nor tomorrow, or all next week. So he's gone, and so it'll have to be his ministers.
Where is he? Where is he?
Another trip.
I know today there's a big announcement. I want to ask you about that, a big wind energy announcement. We'll get into that a little bit later. But this is a premier who's already faced accusations that he's not kind of like Doug Ford that way. They're so close. He doesn't really see much purpose, I don't think, to even having legislative sessions. They're very brief. That's my own interpretation of it, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, this is about transparency and competence, quite frankly. And, the fact that they've just spent, they just have these billions of dollars that aren't allocated through the legislative process for the legislature to approve where spending goes. I mean, that's and their answer is, oh, well. So to me, it's one of those things that Nova Scotians should know what's going on with the money that that folks send through their taxes.
I do want to ask Jordi about that. We'll have to wait until we come back. This penchant for so-called off budgeting. When we return, Focus Nova Scotia. This is our Newsday panel, Thursday edition. I'm Rob Snow. It's Now You Know. It's News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
It's Focus Nova Scotia. Jordi Morgan is here. Matt Whynot here, frequent contributors. I really appreciate it when you people are here. I have to say that. Look, I don't want to go too inside baseball here, but in the Westminster parliamentary tradition, the government, whatever the government happens to be of the day, can't spend money unless the spending has been approved by the parliament. You know, the elected people we send, they get up, they vote. That's what's supposed to happen, yet the Nova Scotia government has somehow managed to spend more than $6.7 billion. $6.7 billion outside of this budget process since 2020-2021. No votes needed. To me, it's extraordinary, given the relatively small size of the Nova Scotia budget, some $20 billion a year. Jordi, what do you think of it?
I'm not a big fan of it, to tell you the truth. And I spent a lot. I don't know if you know much about my history anyway, but I spent a long time with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and we constantly advocated that, you know, and this is not anything that's particularly new with the Houston government. I mean, there was always what they call March Madness that ended up where spending was got out the door, you know, at the latter part of the fiscal year in order to ensure that budgets you're going to be maintained over the, you know, in the carryover. But I mean, the spending allocations in the provincial government here in Nova Scotia, I think, have really resulted from a fairly ineffectual opposition as well. And I'm not trying to blame this on other areas, but the opposition is there for a reason. The loyal opposition, as they'll call it. And the amount of time that is spent, there are many, many tools that the opposition has to ensure that a government is held to account. And they should be spending more time trying to figure out ways to illuminate some of these issues and less time complaining about it in the media. There are legislative tools that are available to ensure that the government is held to account. I mean, one of the things that Nova Scotia does have is public accounts, and that has been a very, very useful tool. It's been eroded over the past number of years, but I do think that it's one of the things that's unique to Nova Scotia, where you actually have an opportunity for the public to sit down and make their points known in front of legislation that's coming in front of the House as well. So I don't see our democracy falling apart because of this, but I do see that there are areas of accountability that need to be improved. They can be improved, and I do think that the opposition has a role in doing that. And they should, you know, we've had a small opposition in this last legislature, but they still have lots of tools at their disposal to hold the government to account.
What do you think, Matt?
Well, I mean, I think you know, I'm glad to hear Jordi saying about not a fan of the unallocated spending. I think the other thing to remind folks is that the Houston government after the last election had a super majority. So I'll get in a little bit of the weeds here, but which means, you know, they had more than 2/3 of the seats in the legislature. And under the rules of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly, rules of the House can only change when 2/3 of the House vote in favor of such a thing. So it wasn't just a 50% plus one, it was 2/3. And because the government has had more than 2/3, they completely changed a bunch of the rules to stop accountability, right? So meaning at public accounts, for instance, they have more. They're the ones that set the agenda. The opposition can't even do it anymore. The process that Jordi was talking about, what used to be called law amendments, where amendments could be made by MLAs in that committee after hearing from the public, has been completely eroded, completely changed the name, and now called the Public Bills Committee. So yes, the public can still come in, but there's a process that has completely been eroded by the Houston government. So the tools that Jordi was talking about for the opposition have been actually whittled down so much that the things that used to be able to happen can't anymore. And so when you want to keep information or away from the public, they've done a pretty good job at making sure that the public and the opposition don't have those tools available to oppose, to critique the government of the day.
All right. Let's talk about a big announcement today. You had some heavy hitters in Nova Scotia. Tim Houston was at this announcement. Gregor Robertson, who's the infrastructure, along with the housing minister in the Carney government. Tim Hodgson, the minister of energy, was there along with the local MP, and also bigwigs from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So this is called the Mercy River Wind Project. Get a load of this. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is going to provide a $206 million loan to the developers of this project, 33 wind turbines. There's a clean technology investment tax credit with 30% of capital costs, $122.5 million. My gosh, how much does it cost to put up 3 dozen wind turbines? But that's what they're doing. 200 jobs at peak, peak construction, 200 jobs. What do you think of the announcement, Jordi?
Well, it's positive. It is a bit surprising. I wasn't even aware that this thing was happening, quite frankly. There's obviously in Nova Scotia, there is a lot of interest in wind energy right now. With Wind West, this is something that, and if you were wondering where the premier was, Matt, that's where he was today, because they were, the federal government was there handing out a ton of money. But they, I think it's positive for the South Shore. The job numbers are what they are. If this is a directional thing where we're starting to see, some of these wind projects being put in that are perhaps leading towards a larger, more profound project with Wind West, then that I think it's a positive thing. I certainly don't think there's a downside here, and it looks like it's going to be positive for that part of the province.
Okay, you can weigh in on that, Matt, or we can switch to the other big budget fight, which is happening around the council table for the Halifax Regional Municipality. Development charges are in focus there. We talked about that, I think, just last week. You can revisit that as well. This is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
Focus Nova Scotia, just a few minutes left with Jordi Morgan and Matt Whynot. We should really talk about what is going on with the budget battle in the Halifax Regional Municipality. It seems to me, based on what I'm reading, that there are members of that council who see a magic money tree by raising development charges. Any increase in development charges will increase the cost of housing in an already expensive housing market. I don't understand why these councillors can't grasp this. Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was this thing I brought up 2 weeks ago, and I think there's got to be a way to bring in a little bit of revenue from the big developers so that some of these some of these increases in property tax that the mayor has been talking about. I mean, let's remember, I thought Andy Fillmore was a Liberal, now he's a Tory, but I think I don't know if you saw this, Rob, or not, but last Friday there was a budget committee meeting, which is all the councillors basically sitting around the same table, just in a committee format. And the mayor didn't even give a heads up as to any sort of motion that he was bringing forward, and basically sidetracked the entirety of council. So much so that the seconder of the motion, one of the councillors out in the Sackville area, wanted to pull his second because how much of his colleagues around the table couldn't understand the process and why the mayor just thought he could just come in and slap this down. In fact, the CAO,
I know,
didn't even know about it. So I mean, this is the type of I would call gong show that Andy Fillmore's trying to run our city like.
But I guess, Jordi, I hear comments from councillors who are saying, well, I look at Toronto, and Toronto's development charges per unit are $45,000 and ours aren't anywhere near that. Well, do you want the Toronto housing market? Is that what you want Halifax to be? I don't get it, Jordi.
Or Winnipeg, Rob, where it's like, 15,000. We're paying like $4,000. So,
all right, Jordi, let's hear from Jordi. Go ahead, Jordi.
Look, comparing it to other cities and their experiences, I don't think it's kind of a fool's game. You can, if you want to look at what it's doing, look at how it's actually impacting the cost of housing in the city. But I will agree with Sean Cleary, who I rarely ever agree with. But anyway, Councillor Cleary said,
can I get that recording, please, Rob?
No, you may not. But he did say that any changes would be done thoughtfully and in consultation with the housing industry. And I think that that's all you can ask, as long as, if the consultation is listened to, that it's understood, and that the councillors have a clear understanding of what the impact is going to be, and they accept the responsibility for that impact. Because if you're going to put more money, if you're going to charge more money into the system, the people that are paying for it are the people that are trying to get into housing, and that has been the most significant cost escalator in housing in this country, bar none. So it's not about developers making exorbitant amounts of money on their capital. It isn't. The returns are not.
And I'm telling you, listen to upper levels of government. I'll close on it. Listen to upper levels of government and the demands from premiers and the prime minister. Their demand is, we don't want higher development charges. We want you to lower your development charges if you want assistance from us in order to build more affordable housing. That's our wrap. Thank you. We'll speak
Rob.
soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Focus Nova Scotia. Jordi Morgan from Enterprise Canada and former NDP MLA in the Nova Scotia legislature, Matt Whynot. Talkback is coming up. We got a good one today. Canada, poorer than Alabama. Poorer than Alabama.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today, making Canadians richer. Here's a question for you. What can the government do to make Canadians richer? We all want more money. What could the government do to make that happen? 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577. Give us some ideas, okay? To make our wallets fatter, to make our bank balances bigger, to make us all better off, more affluent money. What can the government do so that we all have more money? What would you say? What's an idea you have? If you have an idea, we want to hear it. We have a phone line right now, 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Why do we want to talk about this today? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's been some debate going on about how we're poorer now in Canada than Alabama. Think about that. That is the case that's being made. Canada. Think about the big screaming headline. Canada, poorer than Alabama. This is actually a debate that was prompted by an opinion piece that first appeared in the Canadian news media almost 3 years ago. It is based on data that was assembled by Trevor Tombe, prominent economist from the University of Calgary. It appeared in an online publication, The Hub, at the time, doing great stuff there at The Hub. I read their stuff all the time. In that article, Professor Tombe looked at GDP per capita of all 50 U.S. states and the GDP per capita of all 10 provinces. And he highlighted some startling revelations. He said all the Canadian provinces are lagging behind almost all of the American states in GDP per capita. And Ontario has the same GDP per capita as Alabama. The maritime provinces are behind Mississippi. Quebec and Manitoba lag behind West Virginia. Alberta, which ranks as the best performer of all the Canadian provinces, still trailed 13 other states. States like New Jersey and Wyoming and Nebraska and North Dakota. Out of the 60 jurisdictions measured, only 2 Canadian provinces cracked the top 25. Alberta was 14th. Saskatchewan was 25th. And I hate to break it to you, my listeners in Nova Scotia, you were last. The poorest of the poor. 60 jurisdictions, 10 provinces, 50 U.S. states. Nova Scotia, 60th. 60th. And crossing the Confederation Bridge, barely any better. PEI was 59th. New Brunswick was 58th. Ontario, which represents 40% of the Canadian economy, was 51st. I remember reading that at the time. It was a real eye-opener. And for some reason, almost 3 years later, some people are just now talking about it. Why are so many Canadians poorer than the people of Alberta, of Alabama, of Arkansas, of Idaho, of Louisiana, Montana, Missouri, and Iowa? Because there are people who think, I happen to be one of them, it should not be this way. And we should be doing better. And the GDP per capita in Ontario should be far above Alabama, but it's not. The two are pretty much the same. New York State ranked first. GDP per capita more than $100,000 US, $104,000. Ontario, $55,000. Alberta, $80,000. Nova Scotia, $44,000. $44,000. Not numbers to be proud of. For some reason, only now is the national news media taking notice, even though this data was out there for public consumption for almost 3 years. But it's in the news this week. We want to ask you about it. The headlines are suggesting Canada is as poor as Alabama. Most of Canada is, not all of Canada is, but most of Canada is. Most of Canada is not doing nearly as well in terms of purchasing power for the average hardworking person. And so many U.S. states, especially places like New York, California, Texas. What can the government do to change this trend so that we all have more money? In short, what can the government do to make us richer? To make it so we're not as poor as Alabama. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. That is our call-in line. If you've never called before, just mention that. And we'll make your call a priority, and let's talk money today. And what the government can do to help us make and keep more of it. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. It's Talkback. So Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, welcome to it. Love to hear from you today. What can the government do to help make Canadians richer? According to one of Canada's leading economists, many parts of Canada are poorer than the poorest U.S. states. States like Alabama, states like Arkansas. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Miles is in Waterloo today. Hello, Miles.
Yeah, I'm thinking they get to keep the money that they make. They don't get taxed to death. The government doesn't overspend money on every little itty-bitty thing and white claims and who knows what next. So The reason I say that, back in the 60s, you could buy a house and you could pay it off in 5 years because you get to keep your money. Now the money that you make is way up there and you got to give it back to somebody. So people in Alabama, the money they make, they probably pay little taxes. They get to keep most of the money that they make.
Okay, so what would be your suggestions to the Canadian government then? What should the Canadian government be doing?
Stop spending so much money on stupid things and shrink the size of the government. And so basically we can lower our taxes if you stop spending money that you shouldn't.
Okay, so cut the size of government.
Absolutely. Look at Alberta. Alberta doesn't have what? Do they have provincial sales tax?
No provincial sales tax, no.
There you go. So what I'm saying is we get to keep the money that we make and give the government less. Then the government has to spend less. They have to live within their means too.
Okay, so is it all about government spending in your opinion? Or could there be more to it? The kind of jobs that are created, the kind of economic growth that is...
The money that people are making up here is really good, but they're giving it back to the government in taxes so the government can waste their money. Okay.
Is the money that we're making, is the money that we're necessarily making really good? If in New York State, the GDP per capita is $104,000, but in Ontario, it's only $55,000. What's going on there? New York State is a very blue, very high tax state.
I'll give you an example. If a police officer in New York City makes about half as much as a police officer in Ontario makes. So we're giving a lot of good money to government employees. There's no reason that we should be paying out as much as we can. And the unions, I got to hand it to them. The union bosses out there, they negotiate really good. They negotiate.
Well, again, I mean, we had a stat recently from my friend Tom Korski at Blacklock's Reporter, who tracks this stuff according to the Treasury Board. Salary, pension, and benefits, when you add it all up, per public servant in the federal government is $143,000 a year.
Way up there from an American counterpart. A teacher in the U.S. Or a police officer in the U.S., they probably work just as hard, maybe harder. Because I tell you, I wouldn't want to be a cop down there because everybody can own a gun, so you never know when you're pulling somebody over for speeding. The guy's got a gun. Up here, we don't. We don't have that. Right? So anyway.
A little bit off track there, but let me move along. Miles, thank you. Tim is in Nova Scotia. Let's go to Tim. Is in Nova Scotia.
Hi,
Tim?
How are you, Rob?
Very good, Tim. Thank you.
I could
use some more money, Tim. I don't know if you could. You use some more money. I could use some more money. I'm just looking. What can the government do?
I just have to point out the irony of something first before I get into it. It's quite ironic that Ottawa's the 51st. If you catch
the 51st,
the humor in that.
Yes, I do see what you're suggesting there. Yeah, I'm glued into that. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my idea I've had for a while is that if, say, Rob has 5 kids, you live income tax free for the rest of your life.
Oh, really?
I think that would.
Why?
Well, I think that would help fix you're creating 5 new taxpayers for the price of 2, and on top of that, that would solve the immigration crisis because people could actually afford to have families.
All right. So no income tax if I have more than 5 kids. Okay.
Or whatever. It's just 4 or 5. A number has to be stated to just. You know what I mean?
All right. Yes.
And yes, a lot of it comes back to the government. Their crappy policies. Like, I don't know how people can sit there and deny how economically screwed we are. Like, I'm in Nova Scotia. I watched the 10 cities explode over the past 10 years. And now, meanwhile, we have the government. We're like number 60 in Nova Scotia. Meanwhile, we have the government bailing everybody else out in the world.
Now, again, this data is a couple of years old now. It's 2022 data. You're in Nova Scotia.
Yep.
Out of the 60 that are all 50 states, all 10 provinces, 60 jurisdictions. Yep. Last place, you in Nova Scotia at $44,000 US dollars.
Yep. Think about that.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to say, considering the natural resources we had offshore, we've got was it Bearhead? And there's a few other projects in Nova Scotia that for natural gas that aren't going through. There's no reason for our country to be suffering like it is, and it's a lot of government waste. Like, I don't know how, like, they keep, whether you want to talk about Tim Houston or you want to talk about the Liberals, the taxes, the fuel, the carbon taxes. I know they don't say there's not one now. Mark Carney moving his company out of Canada before he was elected. Like, business is running away from Canada.
Yeah, I just, just by comparison, I just wonder, like, at the bottom, you have Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick. At the top, you see a lot of New England states, like Massachusetts, near the top, second, in fact, behind New York, almost $100,000 U.S., $60,000 more than Nova Scotia in U.S. dollars.
Well,
all right.
I'll tell you something else you're probably unaware of. Montreal and their port. I work for the port. Did you know that Halifax is still being dinged for ice breaking services? And there's a lot of deterrence to come from here versus Montreal.
No, I didn't know that.
That's just one part of the infrastructure. Yes.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you for your call. Be right back. More money. Or do you have enough already? If you do, hey, spare some for a poor radio broadcaster. What can the government do to make Canadians richer? In light of this data that suggests many parts of Canada are now poorer than the poorest of the U.S. states. 1-833-668-2577. Have your say on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
According to data from one of Canada's top economists, many parts of Canada are poorer than the poorest of U.S. states. What can the government do to change that and make us all richer? 1-833-668-2577. Ken is in Kitchener. Hello, Ken. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Very good, Ken. Thank you. Go ahead.
I listen
What's
to you
your
guys
opinion?
every day. You and Mike Farwell, too. Hey,
thank you.
We're getting up there in years. I paid enough taxes.
Paid enough taxes. Don't want to pay any more taxes. Well, I don't know if that's really an option.
I know, but come retirement age, you shouldn't have to pay taxes after that.
Oh, after you retire, you shouldn't have to pay taxes?
That's right.
Oh, really? Why do you say that?
And, well, even the investments that you have, I got to pull them out when you're 71 or 72, figuring out how much you're going to take out for the month or maybe the year. I got to pay taxes on that too.
Right. Okay.
So,
but you would still be using
which way you look at it.
But you would still be using public services just because you're retired. And when it comes to healthcare, the older you are, the more healthcare you would use. You don't think you should have to pay for that?
Well,
Contribute to the funding of those public services?
Yeah, there's enough people working.
Well, there's enough people working. Okay. All right. Okay.
Hey,
but you're hitting on something, though. Yeah, tax relief.
My dad lived to be 96 years old.
Right.
I'm getting up there.
Well, I understand it, but it's tax relief, right? You feel crushed by taxes. Is that what it is?
Yeah. And
is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You want to hear something? Well, I don't think it's funny, but the company that I used to work for, I'm retired now, and I get a pension from them, a work pension.
Good for you.
They sent me a letter. They sent me a letter to see if I was still alive. I ain't kidding. I had to sign it and send it back within 90 days.
Right. But let's get to the point here, Ken. You're in Kitchener, okay?
Yep.
So you're in Ontario. There's this ranking of all the U.S. states and all of the Canadian provinces, and Ontario is way, 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 way down the list at 51st, okay? With the same economic value per person, output per person as Alabama, as Arkansas, as West Virginia.
Wow.
Do you not think?
I don't know.
Do you not think that is something that should be addressed? And if so, how do you address it?
I don't know. It's going to be hard.
I mean, it's only $55,000 US dollars, whereas across the border in New York State is $104,000.
Well, I know. That's just,
it's
maybe
almost
they make
double.
more money. Look what it costs for rent and food and everything in New York City.
All right. Not getting a lot of takers on this. I guess everybody's flush with cash. Yeah. Are you just flush with cash? Don't need any more money? Don't think the government should, address the circumstance where most of the country is poorer than the deep south of the United States? This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So I'm asking what the government could do to help make Canadians richer, because we have economists saying many parts of Canada are poorer than the poorest U.S. states, like Alabama. What really gave this new life in the last week or so is that, this idea, Canada is poorer than Alabama. Okay, let that sink in for a second. There was an article last Friday in the Globe and Mail that had the headline, How Canada Became Poorer Than Alabama. How Canada Became Poorer Than Alabama. And I guess for a lot of Canadians, they're kind of clued in. Okay, the sort of economic malaise that this country is in, does this not concern you? Is this not a light bulb moment? Like, what? We're poorer than Alabama? How can that be? That can't be. And yet, in many parts of Canada, that is the cold, hard reality. Oh, but it can't be. Well, as the Globe article points out, what do Canadians think about when they think about Alabama? Okay, quote, backward, full of Bible thumpers, a small state, save for a few pockets, that is dirt poor. Well, if we're poorer than Alabama, what does that say about us? What does that say about us? And how can this trend be reversed? Surely to goodness, you must have some thoughts on this. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. There are 4 lines available. The wait won't be too long. Keith is in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Keith, and being interested.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. What's your opinion?
So there's kind of a lot of different layers to it, I think. One of the main ones, I think, though, is government waste and involvement in business. My dad was fond of saying the only business government should be in is the business of running the country. So when the federal government starts getting involved with doing things like building $50 billion worth of battery plants and then importing Chinese vehicles to fill the market, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's an awful lot of foreign aid that is really on the silly side. Like, sure, sending money to Cuba to feed some people is one thing, but a couple billion dollars a year in random things like gender sensitive farming initiatives in Vietnam and such is kind of wasteful spending. So there's a awful lot of wasted money there. The amount of politicians per person is monstrous in Canada. I mean, we're paying so much for bureaucracy. I mean, we create bureaucracies to get around bureaucracies. We have prohibitive expenses for all kinds of things. I saw a thing the other day saying it cost nearly $1 million in permitting to get a house built in the city of Vancouver, just to get the permits to build the damn thing. It's madness. There's so much taken away. There's so much taken away and thrown in the garbage that sure, the taxes are a big complaint, but what's the reason for them? Why do we need to take half of our paychecks? Why do we need to, take so much from the people? Well, when you buy things like $50 million applications that could be done in a weekend by a geek in a basement for 10 grand. When you're spending $100,000 in in-flight catering to go to Europe, it's just, there's so much going in the toilet that could go back to the citizens. And another thing that's a huge factor is foreign ownership. So, I was in Vancouver when Hong Kong went back to China, and the houses, the real estate in Vancouver literally tripled in a less than a decade, because everybody from overseas was buying up everything in sight and pricing everybody out. But
there's also an argument to be made for more foreign competition in some sectors of our economy, right? Whether that's airlines or just let me finish, airlines or banking or telecom or the news media.
And those are the ones that could be taxed. I mean, we don't tax the American oil companies, but that take all the profits out of the Alberta oil. And when the price drops below like $80, we wind up with a $10 billion deficit. That's incompetence by the provincial leadership, but nonetheless, the reason.
I would just say, Alberta is the highest on this list with a GDP per capita of $80,000 US, but you're still below states like Wyoming.
Yeah, so
why are people in Alberta doing as good as people in Wyoming or Nebraska?
Yeah, well, the best of a bad lot is still bad.
Right. Or North Dakota. North Dakota's way up there. It's third on the list, by the way. Like, what the heck are they doing in North Dakota? All right, Keith, got to run. Thank you. Let's move along. Scott, up next on Talkback. Hi, Scott. Thanks for calling, Scott.
Hi there. How are you?
Very good, Scott.
Hi, Rob.
Go ahead.
Well, no surprise, I echo a lot of my fellow Calgarians' comments, but, very simplistic view on this is our government should be doing everything in its power to keep money that could stay in Canada. We should be spending money in our country, creating our jobs, improving our incomes, with every resource and opportunity possible. I just read we're sending money now to Australia for natural gas for Eastern Canada. I mean, that just blows my mind, whereas that kind of investment in infrastructure could create more money, more jobs, and keep that money working in our country. So that's one point. Second point is echoing the earlier comments. We are way too charitable on a global scale. And I don't know about you or anyone else, but as much as I believe and support charity, if my kids are starving and I can't put food on the table, I'm not writing a $100 check to Red Cross. So why are we giving away our money to other countries when we can't even take care of our own? That doesn't make any sense to me. We abuse our seniors who pay taxes for 50 years.
Right, foreign aid.
Cuba, that's a good point. You know what? You got people starving in Cuba and we can help out? Great, I like that. But that's $8 million and it's targeted. But the billions that we're giving away for a globalistic, presence just doesn't make sense when our people, Canadians, are not doing well. You pointed out all the stats today. But the third thing is, again, we have way too many people with their hand out. Not enough people stepping up and doing what they should do. And, why are we providing health care and extended benefits for people that we don't even want in the country? People who have been told to go back.
Well, it's not, it's not whether we want them in the country, it's whether they're eligible to be in the country. I would just make a note on that. Thank you. Thank you. The question is about whether they're eligible to be in the country when it comes to that interim federal health care program. That's what the Conservatives are pressing on that issue right now, just to be clear. We'll be right back. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Ryan is up next on Talkback today. What can the government do to help make Ryan richer? What do you think, Ryan?
Hi there.
Hi, Ryan.
Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm a first-time caller, Rob. I listen to your show every day while I'm out and about doing my chores with my job, and I think it's just great. And I think that I agree with a lot of the callers already. Ill government spending. Like here in Alberta, we're supposed to get new license plates, and it's like, to tell you the truth, I don't even look at them. I think the police are the only ones that really actually look at the license plate to see if you got a speeding ticket you didn't pay. But to put new license plates and spend money like that is just a waste of money. One other point I just wanted to add was that a lot of people are doing the jobs of 2 or 3 other people. And for mass profits, they're not sharing, even our own corporations within the country. For mass profit, like even Amazon, people, they have nothing to run for. And so, like, we're just doing our job. It's not like we don't work hard. It's not like we don't lift a finger. We all work hard. And
Sure.
It's just that for mass profits, there's just not enough higher wages for us to want to do it anymore.
Okay, so it sounds like you're blaming what? Capitalism? The private sector?
Capitalism, it really kind of hurt a lot of people and a lot of things. Definitely. It's for mass profits and low wages. For some reason, it really always kind of blew my mind that they wouldn't share. I'll bring up one point. There was an episode on the Fifth Estate about a man in Vancouver, I believe. He owns a media company or something, and he had made a lot of money. And they interviewed a woman in Vancouver that her and her husband both have to drive to work. They work the same job. And they were literally crying on the way to work because they don't know how they're going to put their kids through soccer. They got 3 kids, soccer, hockey, and whatever. And this man did what I wish a lot of corporations and companies would do. He doubled their wage. He took the tears away. It made it possible for them to make ends meet and put a little savings in the banks. And I would just require all these rich companies to start thinking about the people
so
that work for them.
employers have to be more generous, you think?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
It's
interesting.
like,
thank you. No, thank you, Ryan. I'm going to jump here. Let's go to Cole up next. Hi, Cole. You're on the air, Cole.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, very
Thanks
good,
for
Cole.
having me on there.
You're welcome. Go ahead. What's your opinion?
I'll mirror some of the sentiment from a couple of the previous callers about keeping a lot of the Canadian money in Canada. I mean, when time gets tough, you got to tighten the belt up a bit. Being in Alberta, one of the things that's really drowning me personally is increase in things like insurance costs. A lot of the money that we're going to some of these organizations is becoming astronomical, and it's getting higher and higher every year. Property taxes skyrocketing. And so for a lot of homeowners, property owners, all of that mixed together, even if you're getting pay wage increases, it's pacing that. So you're not actually getting to keep a lot of that extra money you make every year. So I think we need to come up with some ways, especially in Alberta, that we can start keeping more people's money in their own pocket and throughout the rest of the country as well. I do feel like we are getting taxed to death with taxes, fees that are going to different utilities and necessary bill payments. And we need to start keeping it in the tax earner's pocket. So if we can find a way to do that.
But you have keyed in on something about ever rising. I've experienced this. I'm sure every homeowner has, and auto insurance,
exactly.
By the way, which is getting astronomical as well. Automobile insurance. Insurance costs now are becoming, a significant monthly expense for a lot of Canadians.
Exactly. And so, I've heard a lot of guys talking about, reducing income tax. It's people mentioning no income tax. There was the guy that mentioned having more kids. And, some of them are good ideas, but realistically, a lot of the things that are drowning people are the extra fees that you have to pay. The non-negotiables, your insurance, your groceries, car payments, things that you need to have. And to be honest, things that, you need a car in Alberta. You can't rely on public transit everywhere. And even public transit's just going up through the roof. So there's a lot of these things that people use and have to pay for that are becoming astronomically high to pay for. So if we can find ways that we can reduce some of those costs, whether that is keeping Canadian money in Canada to reinvest, or if the government starts looking into natural resources, increase that GDP, get a lot of people back to work in higher earning jobs.
Yes.
And
Like, what's the plan for innovation? What's the plan for, natural resources, the knowledge economy, AI, all of these things? Yeah, you're onto something there. Thank you. Be right back. to Talkback 1-833-668-2577 to have your say on News Radio today.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So we have several reports now analyzing data from economists suggesting many parts of Canada are poorer than the poorest U.S. states like Alabama. Poorer than Alabama. Canada, poorer than Alabama. What can be done about that? What can the government do to help make Canadians richer? Richer, say, than the people in Alabama. Frank is in Kitchener today. Hello, Frank. Calling from Kitchener.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's absolutely appalling that we'd be in that kind of a position compared to Alabama. But fundamentally, Rob, and everybody's calling, and we continue to pick around the edges. We need a fundamental shift. The number one expense we all bear is taxation and wasteful government. Not that we don't need the essential services, but they're not delivered well. And we need the resolve at all levels to say, okay, we're cutting taxes by 1%, 2%, 3%, 5% a year for the next 10 years. And we will find a way to cut the waste out of government to pay for that and not increase taxes at all. We can pick around all the edges for as long as we want, and we won't solve the problem unless we lower taxation rates. To me, it's that clear. And let's make a resolve and force our government, to say, that's it. You guys find a way to drop our taxes by 3% a year and cut the waste in government and do away with the essential services we don't need, and we'll all argue about that. Of course, everybody's got their own agendas and their priorities. But, Rob, until that happens, you can pick around all the edges you want, and there won't be any significant change to the quality of our life, quantitatively or qualitatively.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So just a reminder, while we're talking about these rankings that have been released by economist Trevor Toome, University of Calgary, 50 U.S. states, 10 Canadian provinces, GDP per capita, comparing GDP per capita. The highest ranked Canadian province, Alberta, but only at 14 out of 60. The next Canadian province, Saskatchewan, 25th out of 60. And then you go way down the list and you see all of these U.S. states: Oregon, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Hawaii, Wisconsin, Nevada, Tennessee, Indiana, Rhode Island, Missouri, Vermont, Florida, Arizona. And then you finally come to Newfoundland and Labrador. 40th on the list. BC, 48th. Ontario, 51st. 40% of the Canadian economy. Ontario. Quebec, 55th out of 60. Manitoba, 56th out of 60. New Brunswick, 58th. Prince Edward Island, 59th. And my old home province of Nova Scotia, 60th out of 60. Behind Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Louisiana. What do you do to change that? Let's pick it up in hour number 2 of Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
What can the government do to help make Canadians richer, better off, more affluent? That's what I'm asking today, because it's in the news. Leading economist says many parts of Canada poorer than Alabama, poorer than some of the poorest U.S. states. You look through these numbers, the original run of numbers from Professor Toome from the University of Calgary. It's interesting, the disparity between some U.S. states and some Canadian provinces. You know, for example, there's Nova Scotia right at the very bottom of this ranking, 60th out of 60, the 50 U.S. states, the 10 Canadian provinces, 60th out of 60. And that's despite Halifax having, you know, half the population of that province and really kind of being a boomtown these days. But Nova Scotia, GDP per capita, $44,000 US. Meantime, in some New England states, it's double that. It's almost $100,000 US in Massachusetts, $90,000 in Connecticut, more than $80,000 in New Hampshire, about $70,000 US in Maine. Nova Scotia, $44,000. Why is that? Why is that? That's just one example. What could the government do so that the average person in, say, Nova Scotia is on par with their counterpart in these New England states? But it's an issue all across the country. Who do we have up next here? Khalid is in Calgary. Hello, Khalid. Thank you for calling, Khalid.
But it's an issue all across.
Oh?
Hi, Khalid. Yeah, hi there.
Hi, Rob. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you for calling, for taking my call. First time caller, but I listen regularly.
What's your opinion?
There are two aspects to the matter. I believe we as Canadians to make more money or to have more money is to understand the money game. There is lots of illiteracy about how money works. Yesterday, I believe some of the major banks announced their profit in their profit in the quarter, this quarter, and it is
the Royal Bank just reported a first quarter profit of almost $6 billion. At the TD Bank, it was $4 billion. Not bad for 90 days.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that is our money. Like the bank that makes that money out of our money saved with them in our checking accounts, in our saving accounts, tax-free saving accounts. So for the government, I think to do something about this is to re-regulate the bank's laws. Like, for example, the mortgages set in Canada, in some European countries are illegal.
What do you mean?
Illegal to have it. As like the principal we pay is our money, but the banks use it, and they take all their interest in the few years that they know people will move or remortgage or refinance, and then they set them again on that. So if the government just put laws that mortgages has not to be set the same way, the bank's profit.
That more of the mortgage payment up front should go to the principal and not the interest. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. For example, or the principal with them, they have to invest it for us, not for them. This is one thing, and also there is I got an offer from a company, because these days is RRSP time,
RRSP
by the end of this
season. Sure.
This month, yeah. So what those lending companies and the banks, what they will do, they know that some people will borrow money to put to maximize the RRSP.
Sure.
So what they offer those people on the RRSP is like 2%, 3%. This company offered me a line of credit for 19.9%. So they already before they receive the money of that borrowed for the RRSP, they already sending it to us in a higher interest rate. So and they give the people on their RRSP like 2-3% and tax-free saving account the same. So what I'm saying is there has to be rules controlling the bank's profits. They have
rules controlling bank profits. All right. Okay. Interesting. Thank you. I'm going to stop here and wait for some more calls. 1-833-668-2577. Thank you for your call, Khalid, and thank you for listening and calling for the first time. 1-833-668-2577. It's hour number 2 of Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What can the government do to help you keep more of your own money, to help make you richer, more affluent? Because we have a report from a leading economist and lots of reaction to it. Many parts of Canada are poor. In states like Alabama in the United States. Can you imagine that? Canada poorer than Alabama. Well, what can be done to change that? 1-833-668-2577. Lots of lines available there for you on Talkback today. Let's go to Shane is in Cochrane today. Hello, Shane. You're on the air.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. Yeah, I hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Hey, I've been listening to you for years, and, I think the most important thing that we're all missing is there's a hot war coming, and I think that Canada needs to go on a war front. I think we need to increase our productivity threefold, and we need to get everybody educated about what's coming down the pipe in the next 5 years. With the rest of the world spending all these funds, and with things heating up in Iran and Ukraine and things on our border, things that are going on, I think it's important.
Okay, I was under the impression that the Carney government is making big investments into defense spending. Huge.
Well, they are, but
investments.
I think we need to get everybody on page, on board. Eastern Canada with the productivity. We need to have LNG, refineries out there. I just read the other day that we're importing LNG from Australia now. And just something I just...
Yeah, you're the second person to bring that up. I missed that story. I'm going to have to look for that. I don't know why we would be doing that.
Like to see a united Canada with, an energy corridor, something that...
energy corridor. Yeah, interesting.
The climate's changing, and the world's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And the world's getting more dangerous. And I think we need to wake up.
Need to wake up.
As a nation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking at these numbers that have been in the news. You look at Ontario, okay, which always boasts about being the economic engine of the country. 40% of the economy is Ontario. GDP per capita, Ontario, $55,000 US. Good for 51st out of 60. When compared to all the US states and the 9 other Canadian provinces, 51st out of 60. Listen to this. All the states that border Ontario. New York State, 104,000. Michigan, closer to 65,000, but still higher than Ontario. Minnesota, about 80,000. Ohio, around 75,000. Same story, Pennsylvania, around 75,000. Every single U.S. state that borders Ontario has a higher GDP per capita than Ontario. And I mean, in New York State, it's almost double. Alberta is the best performing Canadian province at $80,000 US, but in neighboring North Dakota, it's closer to $100,000 US. North Dakota, $100,000 US. Montana, a different story. Montana's closer to the bottom compared to Alberta. down there with BC around $57,000 US. But then you have to ask yourself, well, why is it only $57,000 US in BC? Because that's a good question too. Alberta, Texas, about the same. Not much difference. 80,000 US in Alberta, 78,000 in Texas. So just a couple of $1,000s there. But Alberta, 14th out of 60. The highest, though, of all the Canadian provinces. What could be done to boost these numbers? Which would mean more wealth for Canadians. Elias in Kitchener. Elias, thanks for calling, Elias.
Yeah, how are you, Bob?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, Elias. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. I was just listening to your show. I think I was going to ask you a question. Why they are comparing whole country with one state? I was wondering why. Well,
that's a very good question. Can you compare all of Canada to Alabama? But are we really comparing all of Canada to Alabama? Well, not really, because it's a ranking, as I say.
Is Alabama, is there any province that is richer than a province that's richer than Alabama, or at least close to where we are?
Ontario and Alabama are about the same.
About the same.
Ontario and Arkansas are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
Ontario and West Virginia are about the same. Quebec, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, all poorer than Alabama. Wow, exactly.
Yeah.
What do you do about that?
Yeah, that's really very interesting. But the reason why we are poorer than Alabama and some of the U.S. states is because we are depending on the U.S. for everything. We are a rich country. We have all the resources. Petroleum, minerals, everything is the system we are using for our country. If we work the best way to do our resources, we're going to be richer than U.S. If something is wrong with the system our government is working.
So you think, as many people do, we're not maximizing the riches of our natural resources enough? Whether that's, the previous caller mentioned LNG, we have one of the largest oil reserves in the world. We have lots of, nickel in Northern Ontario, lots of nickel in Labrador as well. We're not making the most of this.
We are not making the most of it. Imagine like a small country like Qatar or Dubai. They are small countries, but they are using their resources. That's why they are rich. We are richer than those countries, but we are not using our resources. And we are depending on U.S. for everything. We should have our own industries for making cars, using our resource. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Well, as well, there was a stat from the C.D. Howe Institute just this week, and I thank you for your call, Elias, the time it takes to say open a mine. If you wanted to open a mine, you see, the Prime Minister talks about mining projects. The Ontario government is running ads all over television. We're opening new mines. Well, are you opening new mines? Because according to the C.D. Howe, it takes, you know how long it takes to open a mine in Canada? 19 years. It probably takes more time to open the mine than the lifespan of the mine. 1-833-668-2577. Love the call, Elias. Thank you. Be right back. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Just before we get back to your phone calls, just an update on a news story that was really lighting up the phone lines on Talkback last year. You may remember this story. It was out of Lindsay, Ontario. There was a guy who was sleeping in his apartment. It was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and another guy broke into his apartment at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he had a crossbow, and there was a fight broke out. The guy was defending himself, and he beat up the home invader and put him in the hospital. And then the police investigated, and they charged the victim of the break-in with assault, aggravated assault, as a matter of fact. You remember that story? Yeah, you probably do. The Crown just dropped all the charges against that guy. No reasonable prospect of conviction, Upon further investigation, it appears to be a case of self-defense. So that's an update to that story. I was wondering what happened to that, whether that was going to make it to court, but they dropped all the charges against that guy. Tricia in Kitchener on our topic of the day, poorer than Alabama. Tricia. Hi there, Tricia.
Is Teresa?
Okay, go ahead. Yes, thank you. Tricia. Am I saying that right? Sorry.
It's Teresa. Yeah, Teresa.
Oh, Teresa.
Okay.
Teresa. Sorry.
Teresa.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, Teresa.
I thought maybe it was a different caller you were talking to.
No, that's okay.
Well, hi, Bob. Okay. First of all, how and where are they getting the statistics? Because it depends how they gathered it. Because I don't quite believe it.
Okay.
I think Canada's
the person who gathered it. The person who gathered it is an economics professor at University of Calgary, and he says they come from. Okay, you asked. I have an answer for you. Do you want to know the answer? Is the Statistics Canada, the Royal Bank, and the U.S. Bureau, BEA, whatever the BEA is in the United States, Bureau of Economic Analysis.
Okay, because I find in Canada anyways that Canada's rich except for, I believe they're getting rid of the middle class because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting, and then more of the middle class are becoming poor. So there's money there to be had, but it's just allocated in the wrong way. You're supporting the wrong people,
Okay. So you think there should be more wealth distribution to take more from the top and.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't mind people being rich.
Okay.
But when they're getting rid of the jobs and they're raising the prices of the everything, the products, then more and more people can't afford things except for the wealthy. So, I mean, you're making a life for wealthy people, but not for the middle class and poor people. So,
So we need more middle class jobs. More middle class jobs.
Well, that's what
or it could be that the cost of living is such that you can't make it on a middle class income in Canada anymore.
Well, that's
one of the arguments that's being made.
Yes.
Right.
Because it's the middle class that really keeps the economy going, but they're attacking the middle class, which is not right. But
for example, in one of the think pieces in response to this today, in one of the columns, is the fact that in Alabama, for example, on a middle class income, you can buy a house because a house is only $230,000 in Alabama, whereas the median house price across Canada is $680,000. Does that explain in part some of it? It maybe goes to what you're saying. What can the middle class afford these days? Back after the news. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So again, asking you today, and thank you for all your calls. Keep them coming at 1-833-668-2577. What the government can do to make Canadians richer. We have data from a leading economist and lots of reaction to it that many parts of Canada are now poorer than the poorest of U.S. states like Alabama. So what can be done to change that? Roman, if you're still with me, Roman, go ahead.
Hi, Rob. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you just fine, sir. Go ahead.
Excellent. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. I'm one of those who came to this beautiful country 18 years ago. No language, $30 in the pocket. Now, since that, I have a nice company built here in Calgary, hire a bunch of people, paying taxes and building community. I'm also the past president. Yeah, so I want to connect a little bit your yesterday shows and today, because I am one of those who were born in Ukraine, and I'm a past president of Ukrainian Canadian Congress. So my point yesterday, I was want to call, but I didn't have a chance, was that I want to bring a little bit of clarity of the money or the support was sent to Ukraine, and the amount that it was, I mentioned yesterday, it's not like cash put in on the suitcases and brought to Ukraine. But by the way, I want to say thank you already for what Canada and done to those Ukrainians there. And I became more Canadian than Ukrainian, to be honest, because of what I've got here. But anyway, the support was sent to Ukraine is not just the cash. It's a lot of expired medications and then a lot of products that was built in Canada, which helps us. But also what I bring here is I was actually in Ukraine when a war started, and then I stayed there for 3.5 years, help locals to going through this difficult time. I was back and forth bringing some medical aids to the schools and hospitals and stuff. So I've been with people from day one in Ukraine.
All right.
But my point is to bring to the topic today was military, because the way the war is now, or the military is a completely different than it was yesterday, and especially on the drones. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, then Ukrainians has the experience that nobody else in the world on the drones and the military. So to get back, what Ukraine got from Canada is the experience that Canada can inherit it from Ukrainians now. And then Canada is the first aligned to Ukraine, and definitely this is something that we as the Canadians have to develop.
Okay, so how would this help Canadians? Because this is what I'm asking today. Okay, how can we become wealthier? How can we become more richer?
Exactly.
So tie that in with drone technology. If we invest in drone technology, exactly. Okay.
That's my point. So the technology and the experience that Ukrainians have now, they can be bring back to Canada and start the huge and scale the drones fabrications and other military stuff that was experienced in Ukraine. So this is what my point was, like how the Ukrainians and Ukraine can help Canada to to develop this and sell in the market and all this. That's my point.
Right. Thank you for calling. You sound like a real success story. Good for you. Thank you. We'll be right back. No, we won't be right back. We're going to back to Nova Scotia for a call. Marion, sorry about that, Marion. Yeah, hi, Marion.
Okay. Hi.
Kind of lose my way sometimes, Marion. Hi there.
Sometimes, yeah, I do too. I think there's a problem with your question. You're assuming the conclusion that we are poorer is correct, yet there are reasons to think that conclusion is wrong. There's a website called Policy Options that discusses this very research and refutes the conclusion. The conclusion is based on GDP, gross domestic product,
per capita,
which is a per person number. So you have to measure productivity and then divide it by the number of people measured by the census, like the legal population. And there are several faults with how this number is calculated and compared between the U.S. and Canada. And some of the key differences are, traditionally, the U.S. has had a higher population of illegal immigrants who contribute to the numerator of the fraction. They contribute to the domestic product, but then they don't contribute to the bottom number in the fraction that's going to make the whole fraction smaller. In the United States, there have traditionally been as many as 11 million illegal immigrants, and we have far fewer here. Another problem, the average American works 3 weeks per year longer than the average Canadian. Again, that adds to the productivity, the top number of the fraction, but doesn't make the bottom number any bigger. Another problem, Americans are not afforded the same benefits that Canadians take for granted, and these benefits subtract from productivity.
Okay, such as
GDP.
Such as
Healthcare. A lot of Americans forego health insurance so that they have money for food and rent, such as vacations, such as maternity leave, such as pollution control measures. And another example, when Americans with children decide where they're going to live, the quality of the locally funded school district is a huge aspect of the choice, whereas in Nova Scotia, curriculum and finances are equalized, across the province. So there isn't that big choice of, is the school district next to mine going to be way better for my child? When I started university, one of my professors had a cute saying. He said, some people use statistics like a drunk uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. And I really think that in this case, someone needs to take a deeper dive into this whole question.
Well, I think it has been a deeper dive, and I know there's a lot of pushback, especially in progressive and so-called labor politics. But GDP per capita has been used as a metric to compare economic performance and even economic well-being for decades, to compare how one jurisdiction is doing to the other. And just because people don't like the numbers or don't want to believe that, oh my gosh, Canadians could actually be poorer than Alabama, doesn't mean we're a bunch of, drunks leaning on a lamppost. I reject that. I reject that wholeheartedly. We'll be right back. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Further to Marion's call in Nova Scotia, there are progressives, left-wingers, they're pushing back against the idea that Canada could possibly be poorer than Alabama. Okay. And, even if we are, who cares? Because, Canada's still a better place than Alabama. I would encourage everyone, read Sabrina Maddow pushes back against the pushback in the National Post today, arguing that we've kind of done this to ourselves. We have elected governments that have put in place, is this up for debate, that we have elected governments that have put in place policies that have made us poorer. And she says, especially for the under 35 cohort, she notes in her column today, 28-year-old in Alabama still has a chance to buy a house. Median house price, Alabama, $230,000 US. In Canada, $650,000. We talked about price to income ratios for home buying yesterday when it comes to starter homes yesterday with Professor Mike Moffat from the University of Ottawa on the Missing Middle Initiative. Well, the price to income ratio in Alabama is 3, which is the historic norm in Canada, but now it's 8.4. 8.4. She also notes that for the first time in Canadian history, retired men in Canada are earning more than young working age men between the ages of 25 and 34. Like a retiree is earning more in the run of a year than a 33-year-old working man. Like, how the heck did that happen? Well, it's all about housing wealth and pensions. And she argues that in Canada, you can have a university degree, you can be earning a middle-class salary, but you're not having a middle-class life. You're not owning a home, getting married, having children. Canadians, she argues, can make a lot more money than someone in Alabama, a lot more money. Doesn't mean they're going to have a better quality of life. And that it's government policy that has delivered this result. Quote, the Alabama comparison sparks heated reactions because it's destabilizing beyond the headline economic numbers. It goes to the heart of our self-image. We're no longer better than Alabama in many ways that matter most. And we refuse to notice because to do so would require seriously interrogating the virtuous story we tell about ourselves. Yeah, bravo. 1-833-668-2577. Matt is in Calgary. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Yeah, very good, Matt. Thank you for your call. What's your opinion?
Good. So the question is how to build a more wealthy Canada. It's an interesting question. I think it's a very complex one, but I'll give 2 suggestions. So I believe that in order to make a wealthier country, I think the best thing that we can possibly do is create as much of a high trust society as we can. And then that's the first point. And the second point is bringing in a lot of creativity into the education system.
What do you mean a high trust society? What do you mean by that?
Well, I lived for about a decade outside of Canada in another country that's very well known for its high trust, and I just see that this is one of these issues where you never know what's wrong with your own culture until you don't live outside of it for any length of time, right? So I'll give the example in Japan. The little kids in kindergarten, they make their own food. They clean their classrooms. They clean the floors. They clean the desks. Everything. They take responsibility for their environment. And this particular task, it's a method of team building and developing trust between the young people. So, for example, anytime any young kid, like let's say there's a bad kid in the classroom, and he throws garbage on the ground. Well, in the West, unfortunately, sometimes that kind of kid is looked at. Oh, he's he's the bad dude. He's the rebellious type. And I don't know, in the news, I don't want to say always, but in the news media and in the information systems, these types of characters, strong personalities, are sort of, I don't know, almost rejoiced, like exalted in a way. But in Japan, like if one of these little kids did that, everybody in the classroom would give him heck and be like, this is our classroom.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So on education, just very quickly, because they are playing the music, on education.
Yeah, education. So AI now will do almost anything for you, do the hard stuff. So we just need to bring it in, I think, right from kindergarten, get little kids to understand they're managers now. You don't have to do all the coding. You don't have to do the detailed work. What you have to do is manage the AI to complete the project. So first is high trust. Implement as much high trust society as you can across the culture. Second is bring in the AI and creativity.
And learn how to manage it. Okay, instead of rely on it, so to speak. Am I onto something there? Am I following your reasoning there?
You have a project, and then you use that AI as a point of leverage, so you can get stuff done a lot faster.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Be right back. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Poorer than Alabama. Parts of Canada poorer than Alabama. Great discussion today. Really appreciated all the calls. Not everybody buys, GDP per capita, to Marion's Point, Nova Scotia. I would actually point you to the Hub once again, and Professor Mike Moffat, who was with us just yesterday. He used to be with Western Ontario, is at the University of Ottawa now. We talked to him yesterday about how starter homes in Canada are just totally out of reach for millions and millions and millions of Canadians who would like to be able to afford just a modest, 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom starter home. It's just not on for so many. He says, okay, set aside this GDP per capita stat. Okay? Because, all right. So maybe it doesn't tell the whole story about how well off people are or how well a country is doing. Set it aside. But let's look at all of this other data and maybe we can get a more complete picture. He says, well, let's look at the HDI. Well, what's the HDI? That is the Human Development Index from the United Nations. And it's there and it's charted on a graph. And in Canada, it's a nosedive since 1995. He says we have declined so much, it would take Canada more than 30 years to reach the same level of human development as our peer countries like Norway, Switzerland, and Iceland. He says, look at something like the World Happiness Index, which they've been releasing since 2012. I always thought it was kind of corny, but economists apparently take it seriously. He notes Canada's fallen to 18th place. We're just not as happy as we used to be. But when you measure Canadians under the age of 30, it's actually 58th place, meaning our young people are among the most unhappy in the world. And I would know, Professor Mike Moffat was an early advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau. He goes on, quote, some of our poorest performance comes in areas that Canadians often view as strengths. We finish 21st in healthy life expectancy, 44th in inequality, 68th in freedom. Imagine that 67 other countries more free than Canada. He says the OECD Wellbeing Monitor assesses 38 of the world's richest countries across 24 headline indicators measuring material conditions, quality of life, community relationships. Of the 23 indicators for which Canada has data, we rank in the top third in only 7. Conversely, we rank in the bottom third for 5, including deaths of despair and gender wage gaps. For most indicators, our performance is mediocre. Mediocre. So even if you dismiss the fact that we're poorer than Alabama, shouldn't we be doing better than mediocre? And shouldn't we demand better than mediocre? Back tomorrow, Friday, Free for All Talkback. Tomorrow. Hope you'll join us then. You can lead the discussion. We can revisit this one or start a brand new one. Until then, the latest breaking news is coming up next. This is News Radio.